All right, that brings us to time.
So I want to start name and how long you've been here? I know you're with a different guild, correct?
I kind of travel all around Ohio to fence.
Okay. So my name's Dominick. I'm with Queen City Sword Guild, and I've been fencing since October of 2023.
My name's Caleb Tong. I kind of travel around, but I'm associated mostly with the Vanguard Club in Columbus. I've been fencing since 2017.
So I've fenced with you a few times before, and like I've told you, you're a very interesting person to fight against, especially longsword, because if I'm correct, longsword is not your primary. What is your primary?
So my primary weapon is a military saber, and then I would kind of going down the scale, military saber, Bowie knife, side sword, and I started dabbling in messer and longsword, which messer fights a lot like Bowie knife, so it's kind of they're kind of like sister systems.
I didn't even know Bowie knife was a discipline.
Yeah. If you ever want to try it, the only hard part right now is finding trainers for it, but we can make do with what we've got.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, a lot of your main discipline shows through when fighting longsword.
Yes, sir.
So you said you were experimenting with just using one hand. Is that what you were doing today?
Yep. Because of how longsworders complete their cuts, a lot of them can be countered with the saber cut of Preem, or the saber parry of Preem, which because it's a yielding parry, the force that you're receiving is kind of irrelevant. I think you might have noticed where I caught you a few times with that, where you were really sure coming in, but I kind of used that against you, where even though you were closing, I was able to kind of ride your cut up with my parry and then hit you in the head.
Yeah, you caught me on a lot of them, and I think by the time I started noticing some similarities, I was so winded I couldn't do anything about it.
That is
you landed great hits on that too.
As sad as it can be, conditioning comes out to be a lot of fencing. Just conditioning the basics over and over, which to build the muscle specifically for swordsmanship, just doing footwork training and push-ups, that's going to get you really far in like your longevity in sparring.
Yeah. Your cardio too. Were you even winded at the end of that?
No, sir.
No.
But that's entirely because of doing sports fencing.
Yeah.
Because those go to 15 touches to end, and because of right of way and stuff like that, it can go to end up being like 30 to 45 exchanges in each match.
Yeah, so you were probably still thinking clearly through all of that.
Yes, sir.
I was breathing through a straw.
But that's the different. I've been doing this since 2017, and trust me, if I could go back in time to the point where I was when you were fencing, and our past self spot, you would beat me hands down.
Yeah.
It's just been 3 years of conditioning and dedication that it's
for sure.
You're fencing beautifully. Don't take that. Yeah.
I got a long way. So you mentioned you've done tournaments before, correct?
Yes, sir.
What were your experiences like during those?
Honestly, so I've done about 4 or 5 tournaments, and I medaled in 2. I took 3rd place at the Arnold in 22 in military saber, and then I took 2nd place at a longsword tournament in 21.
Yeah.
The military saber tournament, it was a little nerve-wracking, but the worst thing you can do for yourself mindset-wise going into a tournament is expecting yourself to win or perform well.
Yeah.
I went into the Arnold nervous, but expecting to completely underperform. So when I got to that 2nd elimination fight and realized no matter what happens, I medal, that kind of let me let go and beat an opponent who was stronger than me and get that 3rd place place spot.
That's fantastic.
And so that was the other reason with the longsword tournament why I medaled there too, because that was my first time holding a longsword.
Yeah.
And so just going in there and just letting go and let God. And so if anything, if you go into a fencing tournament, just go to have fun. Don't expect to win. Don't expect to lose, because so much of that is just going to be a coin toss on how either of you are feeling walking up to the match.
Yeah. So something I was curious about, what do you look for when you fight a new person? Not somebody who is inexperienced, but like if you were to travel to a new club, what's the first things you look for in a spar?
I guess it would kind of depend on what weapon I was fighting them with.
Yeah.
With a military saber, it's kind of just you just throw stuff at the wall and see how those first 3 touches go, and you can kind of you see how your opponent's parrying, see what if there are any vertical lines where you can find them and target them there. But with weapons that kind of fight at a slower tempo, like longsword and messer and side sword, I get into the Tabou's posture and kind of walk through it, throw head cuts, and seeing how they respond to those first kind of 3 strong head cuts. You can learn a lot about a fencer from that. Yeah. So because the head cut is just naturally so like you feel it when you get it. It kind of resounds in your helmet. It conditions you to not want to have that happen again. If you can get them into the rotation where they're responding really big to those head cuts, that's where you can kind of start finding undercuts to the torso and stuff. And that has its mirror in military saber too. It's just on a horizontal plane instead of a vertical one. So instead of head cuts, you're going for attacks to the inside line. And once you can get them to over-respond to those inside line attacks, that's when you start attacking their arm. And it's the same concept, just kind of flipped.
Yeah. So once you start learning kind of their habits, are they easier to fight after that, in your opinion?
Yeah. That's the thing. It kind of depends. This is where the chess of fencing starts. It kind of depends on how they respond to your game.
Yeah.
Learning which step of your process you need to take somebody to beat them. If you can beat somebody on the first exchange, do it. But there are going to be fencers who you have to walk to like the third or fourth exchange before their posture starts to break and you can find openings on them.
Yeah.
And if someone is better at playing at those higher tempos and they learn the way that you're trying to counter their game, they might have the answer to the answer you give them. And if you haven't trained to get that far in the exchanges, you won't have a reply to their answer to yours. And so it's about fighting people at much different levels than you, so you can develop this fencing vocabulary to keep having the conversation, no matter how long it has to go.
Yeah.
I think one of the big questions is, in terms of learning different styles, how do you find them applicable to other styles?
So I'm kind of the system that I study, Gerard Thibault's. I found that it's kind of applicable to any weapon that you throw, any one-handed weapon or any weapon that you can wield with one hand. It gives you a way more to hold your body and to use your arm rather than use the weapon that you're using. So if you can kind of just walk to bow, you can learn how to fight any weapon at a base level, essentially, one-handed at least. Because you're essentially just trying to walk to the side and cut to your opponent's head, and having that rounding where you're really sure-footed, but your opponent is kind of put off by the fact that you're using it with one hand. Just going in with a concrete game plan while they're kind of unsure, that can win you touches that you shouldn't get otherwise.
And how do you find footwork applicable?
Again, it's just his footwork is really applicable to any weapon that, the way I describe it, is any weapon that you can fight one tempo slower than military saber. Because military and Olympic saber is so fast that you kind of have to get into modern fencing posture. But if the weapons are moving like half a tempo slower than that, you can stand in Thibault's posture and respond to everything pretty simply.
In your studies, do you focus on the more historic aspects, or do you focus more on the sport aspects of fencing?
No, I would say I'm more of a sport guy. Like, I can't claim. There's another guy, Colin Brandenburg. He is the actual Thibault scholar in the United States. I have just found a system, and like I have a layman's understanding of it, and it works for my biomechanics. So I would say I'm definitely more of a sportified fencer, because I didn't really start getting competitive until I added in the sports saber toolkit that I started learning here at the SAL for sports fencing. You kind of have to be able to speak both languages to fight one-handed weapons, because there are going to be fencers who are going to try to use both tool sets against you.
Yeah, that's something I was curious about too. Something I'm going to ask people with all different disciplines is how much, or is there any techniques that aren't historical but work especially well? So kind of like sporterized versus historically focused.
I wouldn't even. I wouldn't even say that I'm really.
And I think I may be phrasing that.
No, you're phrasing that perfectly. I wouldn't say that I'm really the person to comment on that, honestly, because I'm kind of privileged in that, at least from the way that I view it, military saber has a living lineage in sports saber.
Yeah.
So obviously the competition right now doesn't really look like it, but the training methods and like the competition at this level, it feels like fighting a military saber.
Yeah.
So if you go into sports saber with that mindset, you'll learn a lot about military saber and vice versa. So I would say, honestly, more of the HEMA stuff transfers over to military saber in ways that have kind of been forgotten over time. But sports saber, honestly, is just, if I was going to teach somebody from brand new how to fight sports saber, I would use, or how to fight military saber, I would use the sports saber curriculum that Dwayne has shown me.
Yeah.
How did you feel that the matches went today?
Because I fought Caleb before, I knew in the back of my head kind of what to expect from him. A lot of overhead work and a lot of him presenting me the point. I couldn't connect with anything. All my game plans went out the window the second we started fencing. So I feel like I did quite poorly. And, no.
It was a speed issue at some points because I'm newer to this weapon. I kind of have to fight at a higher tempo than I normally would, kind of casually sparring. You had the right idea, but part of my game is baiting people into closing when they feel like they have the line, but they really don't.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to seize the tempo against me. So I'm encouraging you to move in by starting to moulinet, but you're out of range, so anything that you throw at me is not going to hit me.
Yeah.
But if you start moving in, when I am like here in my moulinet with the long sword and gain the blade there and push through, and that's where you can start doing the grappling game that I can't really do.
Yeah.
The only reason you weren't able to engage in the grapple was just because of my long arms and just you were coming a tempo too early to punish where I was.
Yeah, I
because
noticed you got close a few times.
Yep.
Yeah.
You definitely did. And those
trying to
hand
push
snipes you were
something
going
else.
for.
Yeah, I was going for a couple hand snipes. What else was I going for? I was definitely not trying to go overhead too much with you because you do have a height advantage on me and you got a range for sure. I think I did get one where I took my dominant hand off the blade.
Yeah, you got a very
didn't
beautiful stab to my face doing that.
Did I?
And that's the kind of the tempo that you have to seize against me. Is
Yeah.
when I'm doing my tricky nonsense, you
Yeah.
just counter that with simple stuff. Stop cuts, stop thrusts,
Yeah.
stuff that leaves you out of my range, but at an effective range where you can just stop thrust and then rise kind of into the longsword version of that cream guard that I was doing.
Yeah. There's a couple. My biggest thing is, and I'm doing it to myself, I'm not practicing outside of here.
Yeah.
So my muscle memory isn't there.
And again, I would say just, you don't even, if it's because you don't have a longsword or because it's kind of, if it's too hard to just in the middle of the day, grab the gear and stuff, push-ups. Just find some little, every time I go take a drink of water, I have to do 10 push-ups.
Yeah.
And when you can build up to doing 200 push-ups casually a day, sword fighting is nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, just for me, my muscle memory is bringing the sword up into the long guards.
Yep.
So I think you've noticed, I think you've struck a couple of
I'm so
these.
sorry.
No, please don't be, because that's my fault. Because I'm bringing the handle right here, but I shouldn't be. I should be somewhere else, but still. That's my muscle memory, my incorrect muscle memory.
And attack-wise, we'll work on this too next time that we spar.
Yeah.
A lot of the reason I'm so able to parry those when I go into preem is because you're going diagonally.
Yeah.
If you start incorporating, get me to go into preem and then cut horizontally into me, the blade goes like this, and you'll get a lot of body strikes on me.
Okay.
So just throw, and those, when you go to fight other longsword fencers who are fencing in the traditional two-handed style, those horizontal cuts are going to be deadly, the same because you're not going to expect them.
Okay.
So what are you going to do different next time?
I'm going to start practicing a lot more at home. I'm going to build a muscle memory so when I get into these spars where I can actually put the plan into motion. The things that are in my head are going to connect and make sense here. And it's going to translate a little differently. I think I'd like to work with Caleb in the future, like the things you were talking about.
Of course.
With correcting my tempo, like you were mentioning, and working on getting better cuts.
I highly recommend, even if you don't stay the whole time, going to that small sword symposium they're going to be hosting in February. As much as I kind of dislike fighting the weapon, learning small sword and foil is the best place for any fencer to start off, because it's fencing digested to its simplest parts, and so you learn tempo, you learn footwork, you learn spacing, without having the blade get you touches that at the point where you're at you really kind of don't deserve. That was one of the traps that I fell into starting fencing, is I was getting a lot of touches that I didn't really earn. And so going back and starting foil and starting Olympic saber, I got the grounding that I should have had, and so now I have a strong grounding that I can throw the extra stuff on top of for when I can't beat somebody with the fundamentals, instead of just relying on the bull crap. And then when that was not working, I didn't have fundamentals to fall back on.
So fighting Caleb is very visually distinct from fighting Ethan.
Yes.
How did it feel? How was it different?
Everything I knew. So it's like what's a good analogy? It's like somebody playing football playing against somebody that plays hockey professionally. They train completely differently, they work with completely different, similar but different equipment. Of course, I don't know sports, so my analogy sucks. But the essence is, I'm fighting somebody who trains under a different discipline. While they cross over, a lot of his guards are different, his cuts are different. He hangs out mostly in the point. And it was completely different from fighting Ethan. And that's why I like fighting him so much. Because it takes a mold that you get used to with sparring, and it just breaks it.
We have the same point scoring, but we're shooting at different goals essentially. You're trying to get touchdowns while I'm shooting points into the goal.
Oh, that's so much better analogy.
No, that's it. You started it, my friend.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah. But yeah.
And that's exactly why we're here, to fight a whole bunch of different people
Yeah.
and see how it all works out.
Exactly.
And the only reason I've gotten to the point where I'm at is having people like you to spar against consistently. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate it.
I got you.
Is there any other items that either of you would like to discuss?
No, just encourage people to come out here and try it. We're very welcoming. First class is free.
Absolutely. Yeah, like you said, first class is free. And I started so recently that I remember my first day like it was yesterday. It might as well have been. Everybody was so welcoming. You were there, and your wife was there on my first day, and you were so friendly to me that it made me want to come back. And I'm glad I did, because I really enjoyed this.
It's all about the community.
Thank you for doing this, Aaron. Seriously.
All right. Thanks again.
Yeah, my pleasure.
As always.
Thank you, my friend.